Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to my video on my channel. Today we're going to be doing something a bit different. We're ranking all 33 MCU films from worst to best. So it'll be a bit of a long one, so do strap yourselves in. Kicking myself at 33, the worst film in MCU history. Well, the worst MCU film is Thor: Love and Thunder. I mean, this film was just terrible in a lot of ways. I think Gore was such a waste of villain. Thor was just an idiot in this. Just the whole kind of character story, the whole story of this film was just terrible. Like, Zeus was awful. And it's just too much to complain, honestly. It was just such a letdown. The humour just didn't hit here. Next on the list, sorry, it doesn't work, but 32 on the list is For the Dark World. This one ranks down here for the obvious reasons. I thought, of course, the villain Malekith was just so boring. And it's just such a forgettable movie. I honestly always forget what even happens in here. I think the best part here was the Thor Loki dynamic. I think that worked here. But apart from that, this film can just get chucked away for all I care. Moving in, 31 of the list. Number 31 is actually the newest film, The Marvels. And this film just ranked so low just because it just felt so weird. Such a weird film. Like, there actually are a few reasons as to why I put this film just so low. Of course, the villain Darben was I thought Darben was such a boring villain. Obviously, this film was about the three Marvels, and none of these characters I'm not like that big on. Like, Miss Marvel's okay, but like I don't like love any of these characters. My favorite part was actually the ending when they introduced Beast, and also that part where we saw Kate Bishop. That's pretty cool. But everything else, there was just like what a weird plot. I was like, and I think what I felt here is that the tension in this film, the tension just stayed the same throughout the film, which is of course one of my biggest issues here. And it was just such a light-hearted film. There's just no emotion to it. So yeah, those are my key problems with the Marvels, MCU these days. You know what I mean. Number 30 on the list is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Look, a while back I was like, yeah, okay, this film isn't bad. Like when I first watched it, I was like, it's not that bad, is it? Well, but after some rewatches, the flaws in Quantumania are pretty noticeable, alright? The humour just doesn't stick. And another beefy thing that people also talk about is Kang. Kang, like, even though Kang was probably still one of the better parts of his film, his villain felt quite underwhelming. I mean, if you compare him to other villains like Thanos, who's his predecessor, what he's supposed to live up to, and then of course the High Evolutionary, who comes right after him, they both just feel like way better. But with Quantumania, yeah, I mean, look, and I think, alright, his crew wasn't there either. Yeah, and I thought that MODOK, was just such a lame idea, being MODOK, and that was just so cheesy. His redemption arc was, that was cheesy. And I think Janet Van Dyne was one of the better parts here. I think Hank Pym and the Wasp did absolutely nothing there. And for a film that's supposed to have like a big threat in Kang, who's supposed to have this big threat, they just wash it all down with a bunch of jokes, and then at the end, what happens? Oh yeah, Kang gets defeated by ants. Think about Thanos, he needed all the Avengers to take him down. Kang only needs two, Ant-Man and the Wasp. So, that final battle was just... Alright, I think Jonathan Majors was fine, but obviously, as you already know, the issues regarding Jonathan Majors, as he is arrested, will make things a lot harder. So, Quantumania was a big disappointment. That's 2023 films would be disappointment, but there's actually another one which, you'll be surprised. Number 29 on the list is Captain Marvel. I actually thought this is a bit better than the Marvels just because the plot was a bit clearer. I felt like the tension just felt bigger, personally. Even though the character of Captain Marvel just didn't interest me. I just found it to be kind of bland. And of course the villains here were just boring, to be honest. I think one of the best parts here, of course, was Nick Fury and Goose. These are the better parts of this film. But it just isn't a film that I honestly go back to rewatch, ever. Number 28 on the list, that'd be Eternals. Now, I think this film, again, if this was a Disney Plus series, I think this would work well. But it's a movie, and it just explains way too much stuff at one point. And I'm just not really interested in any of these new characters. Sure, it kind of explains, a bunch of MCU lore, but none of them really interest me. So that's just my main problem. Again, should be a Disney Plus series. There's really nothing else to say. At number 27 on the list, I have Thor. Now, look, I think this film is not terrible. I do prefer this over The Dark World and Thunder, and it is one of the older stuff in the MCU. But yeah, my main problem here is just that character of Ford was just a bit bland. I mean, it was kind of fun seeing him go to Earth, but the character just wasn't extremely interesting. Loki wasn't the best film for Loki. I mean, Loki was fine, but not like his best film for sure. I thought some of the Earth and Asgard stuff, it was a bit weird. So I don't think this film was terrible. I just think it's just not as watchable as many other MCU films. Number 26, Ant-Man and the Wasp. I do put this ahead of Quantumania because, of course, you have Ant-Man's crew. It is perhaps, quite possibly, the most light-hearted film in the entire MCU, especially since it comes right after Infinity War. It's weird, so it was kind of a nice balance for that. But I don't know why the plot of this film is just so boring. It's just very low stakes for Marvel. All it is just Ant-Man, Hank Pym, the Wasp, and his crew just going after a shrunken lab. Alright, or a suitcase. That was just a very weird plot right there. The villains honestly weren't the best. So yeah, I think this film, while it wasn't terrible, it's just one of the more forgotten films in the MCU that, I honestly wouldn't really think about going back and rewatching much. 25th place is Iron Man 2. Now, I don't hate this, but I do have this a bit higher than some of the other ones because it is Iron Man. Iron Man is my favourite MCU character, in case you guys don't know. But this film still had its clear flaws. I was quite disappointed, especially compared to the greatness we got with Iron Man 1. So Iron Man 2 has members. I think Tony Stark, his character wasn't handled the best. It was still good, but not that. Anyways, I still think there were some moments here that I thought shined. This was old days MCU, back when the MCU was simple and straightforward, when there was no multiversal stuff. Yeah. But the main problem with this, of course, you have the plot. The plot is just so messy and a bit over the place. And you got the villain in Whiplash. Whiplash is just such a generic, boring villain that I honestly do not care at all for. And it was just kind of lame, quite frankly, in that final battle at the end. I mean, it was kind of cool seeing Iron Man ready to team up, but how long did that last? Oh, yeah. Not long at all. And then Whiplash, yeah. Justin Hammer was better villain than Whiplash, but, 24th place goes to The Incredible Hulk. I honestly think this has been an underrated film in the MCU, just because I can imagine the old-fashioned vibes. I kind of like how this was a more serious film. You can kind of take it more seriously. Plus that fight scene at the end between the Hulk and the Abomination, that was cool. Now, Abomination wasn't a great villain, but that final fight was good. And I didn't mind Edward Norton here. I thought Edward Norton was actually fine personally. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff right there. However, it still had its flaws. It wasn't it did feel a bit disconnected from the MCU, and wasn't the most memorable in terms of the plot. Number 23, Black Panther for Wakanda Forever. So in my opinion, this is actually one of the more overrated films in the MCU. It wasn't bad by any means, but I just prefer lots of the other MCU movies than I do Wakanda Forever, and I thought the first one was better. One of my main problems here is, there's no T'Challa, and again, you can understand, they were dealt a tricky hand. The supposed lead actor did pass away, which was a tragedy. So they had a bit of trouble coming up with a plot for this film. And I think with going to problems, I think this film just went on and on too much. It just felt like it was just dragging on. There was some unnecessary stuff in here, you couldn't care about. I think Namor was an okay villain at best. I don't think he was a bit overrated, but he was an okay villain for me. Seeing Killmonger return was pretty cool. See, there was some good stuff here, but there was also some unnecessary stuff like Ironheart. I mean, the final battle was the only thing that Wakanda Forever has over over Black Panther is Wakanda Forever has over Black Panther is the final battle, which is only better than the first movie. Other than that, it's meh for me. Not one I honestly think about rewatching too often. Even though I can admire what they're going for. Number 22, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This is another one, right, where I feel like there are good elements to it, right? I felt the whole kind of multiversal stuff here was great. Some of the visual effects here were pretty impressive, but it was a bit of a messy film. The whole plot was a bit messy. There was actually a bunch of rewrites for this film. It was I can't remember exactly how much, but there was a lot of rewrites for this film. They could have honestly gone either way. I actually thought Scarlet Witch was a pretty good villain. Doctor Strange was fine in this film. And it had some cool fight scenes, I think, for sure, where Scarlet Witch is slaughtering the entire Illuminati. Where... Yeah, it's just you get the message, right? Zombie strange. I don't know. Yeah, something like that. That was weird. Number 21, Avengers Age of Ultron. This is the worst Avengers film, but still not a bad film. There were some good elements to it, like seeing the Avengers come together as a family for the first time. That was nice to see. I thought Ultron was a fine villain. Could have been better the way they went with him. I feel like they could have taken Ultron more seriously than they did. But that's not to say he wasn't a bad villain. He was still a good villain. And the film was a bit messy in some ways. I feel like that battle at the end just went on and on and on. I felt, I mean, maybe that's the point, but I don't know. I'm just saying what I think is what I think. So yeah, overall, it was fine. That brings us to number 20 on the list, Iron Man 3. Okay, another film which I think had good elements. Kind of the most Christmassy film in the MCU. I think that Tony Stark's character was handled very well. I think Tony Stark was a great character in this film, better than he was handled in Iron Man 2. But yeah, so his whole kind of story there. But the only problem is that what they did with him at the end, it made it feel like it'd be the end of him. But in actuality, it wasn't. But apart from that, character handled well. Has some pretty cool scenes. Trying to fight his inner demons, if that makes sense. But the main problem with this, of course, is the villain, the whole Mandarin twist. Killian and Slattery were both, I don't know, not great villains, but it kind of served the purpose, I guess. Right, so at number 19 on the list, that'd be Doctor Strange. Now, Doctor Strange, again, wasn't terrible by any means. I think it has some good aspects, like, the whole CGI in this film was amazing. The visual effects, they were amazing, alright? Some very amazing visual effects right there. They were visually stunning. I think Benedict Cumberbatch's Doctor Strange, good casting choice. I think the origin story to him was actually done pretty well. I quite like the ancient one. Tilda Swinton in there, pretty good. But of course, there are my two problems with this film. Of course, you had the plot. The plot was just not that interesting, and the villains. The villains I thought were pretty generic. I mean, Caecilius was just a bit of a waste of Mads Mikkelsen's style. Basically a waste of his talent. And then Dormammu, I think, just didn't see much of. However, there was a very cool scene towards the end of the film where Doctor Strange's fight with Dormammu. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. That was a cool scene. You can't lie. But yeah, moving on to number 18 on the rankings, that'd be Spider-Man: Far From Home. Now this is an interesting one because it had its flaws for sure. But as you know, I'm a bit of a Spider-Man fan, and there was some good stuff. There are definitely better Spider-Man films out there than this one, but it still works enough. I thought Mysterio was a pretty good villain. I think Mysterio kind of carried this movie as a whole. And that, like I said, now he reveals his identity. Plus, Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man going on his journey, kind of like a journey, which of course works with Spider-Man. I think it was a pretty light-hearted film, just up until the end, of course. And kind of felt like a field trip up until, all the Spider-Man Mysterio kind of shenanigans. Followed up at number 17, I have Black Widow. And I actually think Black Widow is one of the more underrated MCU films. I think, look, don't get me wrong, there are flaws, right? Of course, you have the fun about that final battle at the end. Yeah. And also the villains, alright? Look, Taskmaster, that whole Taskmaster stuff was bad. And Dreykov was a mid-villain at best. So he did suit the film he was in, though. But there's some good stuff, like the family elements there. The family elements between Black Widow, Yelena, the mum, the dad, Red Guardian. They were all done beautifully, I thought. That was some emotional stuff right there. And Florence Pugh as Yelena, and David Harbour as the Red Guardian. Amazing additions to the MCU, and I'm actually quite happy. I mean, this film did come 5 years too late, technically, and it came out at the wrong time. Plus, the whole came out around the COVID pandemic time. Besides that, I think there's actually a lot here to like. Moving in at number 16 on the list, that'd be Captain America: The First Avenger. And this was a fine origin story. I could actually admire all those World War II vibes going on. And Steve Rogers is like the definition of a hero, right? Someone who puts others before himself. That's exactly what Steve Rogers is. The romance I think was fine here. I thought Red Skull was a fine villain. I don't think he was great, but he was definitely fine. He fit the movie he was in for sure. So there was a lot of stuff here that I could appreciate. it had like it had a different kind of style to the other MCU films, which I appreciated, and doesn't, you know what I mean. Number 15 goes to Ant-Man, and hear me out. I think Ant-Man is actually one of the most underrated MCU films. This is by far my favorite of the Ant-Man stuff, and even though the Ant-Man movies are honestly worse than much of other stuff, but the first Ant-Man film I actually quite enjoyed it. It's a small scale film, but for a good reason. It's actually quite watchable. If you want a break from like the big stuff, right? You can go and watch Ant-Man, because I actually enjoyed a lot of this film. Paul Rudd's Ant-Man. That's a good casting choice. I could actually enjoy it quite a lot. Michael Douglas and his crew, Luis, with those amazing stories, bro. They work well. So yeah, there's a lot of things here that I think can be admired. It's kind of like a nice heist film. I'd be fine with watching. However, the only issue with this film is the villain. Yellow Jacket was a very generic villain, but that's about it. Everything else in this film I think works. Number 14, Black Panther. Now I feel like this film kind of has gone down a bit since it first came out in the cinemas, and I think they still have a bunch of good stuff with this film. I think that T'Challa. I think the best part of this film, of course, been just like the dynamics between T'Challa and Killmonger, as I mentioned in my top 10 villains list. That dynamics works so well, and I think Killmonger as a villain it's interesting how you have a villain in Killmonger where he doesn't necessarily win, but he has a legacy, right? That kind of affects the hero T'Challa in a way. He kind of wins over in terms of legacy. Or he kind of wins the moral kind of battle, if that makes sense. He encourages T'Challa to open up and kind of show a bunch of stuff to the world. That all works for me, right? However, there was some bad stuff about this film. The jokes were cringe, right? And that CGI battle at the end didn't probably age the best, but it was some good stuff. I think Andy Serkis's claw works well. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. And it was interesting. It was interesting to see the world of Wakanda, and I did quite enjoy that battle between Black Panther and Killmonger, like when they were fighting for the throne. That was a good battle. It was brutal, honestly. It was quite brutal, to be honest. Quite dark in some ways. But also, that really good scene where you see where Killmonger's obviously getting his necklace, right? He's got that Black Panther powers, and he's walking to the throne like, he's showing people he means business. Sorry. Number 13 on the list is Shang-Chi in relation to the Ten Rings. This is a film I feel like the plot isn't great, but there are some good characters here. Of course, the dynamics between Shang-Chi and his dad, Wenwu, works well. I think Wenwu, in my opinion, Wenwu was an amazing villain. I thought Wenwu was a great villain. Very interesting character right there, and he kind of carried the film all in all. But of course, that final battle at the end was alright, but not the Dweller in Darkness one. Well, the one between him and Wenwu was fine, but not the Dweller in Darkness one. So there was actually some good stuff here, like the cult, like martial arts fighting style. I think that worked well. So yeah, definitely one of the better parts of Phase 4 for me personally. Moving into number 12 on the list, we have Thor Ragnarok. Another film that I think has kind of gone down since its first release. There's also a lot of good. It's by far the best Thor movie still. I thought Hela was a fine villain, even though they improved her in What If Season 2. But yeah, I think they changed Thor's character for the better. Like Thor, and make it much more interesting and much more likable. And that kind of like Thor Hulk stuff was fine. And so yeah, the comedy works here. However, the reason why it's not any higher is because sometimes the comedy takes away from the tension. Because this is actually a pretty dark film if you think about it. Thor loses his home, Asgard, which is pretty dark all in all. So, yeah. Besides that, there was actually a lot here that I think you could admire with this film. Moving on to number 11, just missing out the top 10 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Yeah, I thought Vulture was a pretty good villain. Of course, that scene in the car is just amazing. And I think I like how it's like a different kind of Spider-Man story. It's not like the other ones where, it's like the classic origin story. He's bit by a spider. No, that already happens in the MCU. It's his coming-of-age story where he has to come of age, and he's kind of like Iron Man Jr. in a way. Iron Man is his mentor. Unique, right? Yeah, I think it kind of works. So there's actually quite a lot here that I can appreciate with Homecoming. It's an overall fun film. It's not like this. It's more kind of lighthearted. It's not like world-ending stakes here. It's just more like, stopping someone from selling weapons in the black market that could be of mass destruction. So yeah, I think it all works here well. And number the top 10 best MCU films. Number 10 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, this is actually one film that I think is highly underrated. I think there's a lot of goodness to this film. Plus, I think the Gaia trilogy is just amazing. It is the worst Guardians film, but it still works very well. I thought that, just like the Guardians together as a family just works so well. All the dynamics together is good, and of course Star-Lord's Yondu was like the goat in this film. Star-Lord, Ego. I think Ego was a fine villain. Could have done more of him. I think Ego and Star-Lord have interesting dynamics for sure. And that scene with Star-Lord just like blasting at Ego. It broke my heart to put that tumor in her head. What? You killed my mother. Yeah, so there was some stuff there. Yondu and Rocket, I think, were a good combination. It was just nice to see Yondu and Rocket just kind of bond over some stuff. Kind of getting a bit more personal there. So yeah, I thought there was actually a lot of good stuff about Guardians too, and I think it's underrated, you know. Even though some of the comedy kind of wasn't great. But anyways, number 9 was Avengers, the first Avengers film. So this is another one. Like, I can imagine, like, I only started getting into Marvel like last year. I can imagine going into cinemas, and I was like, and you'd be like, damn, this film good. This film good. Right? It must have been like amazing for like other people going there. Loki was a good villain. Seeing the Avengers assemble for the first time. Oh, that music there gives me chills every time I can listen to it. So yeah, there was some great stuff here. And of course, like Avengers, like the kind of their own banter with each other. I could enjoy that a lot. See, what the stakes? It wasn't like that dark of a film, in all honesty. But it was a fun movie overall. Maybe it's not as good as it once was, like prior to First Date. But there was some cool stuff here for sure. Number 8, Spider-Man: No Way Home. Another film, you know, honestly, for me, these top 8, honestly, could be like a divisive order. This is just the order I personally think of them in. No Way Home was great, alright? It was just so nice to see Spider-Man Tom Holland finally at his lowest point in life, where he's lost like a lot. His identity got revealed to the world. And then guess what happens? Yeah, other villains from other dimensions come in, which was great. His aunt dies, his life goes downhill, and then Doctor Strange has to come up with a spell to kind of like, so just for Peter's safety, so everyone forgets who he is. And that's some pretty dark stuff happened in No Way Home. Yeah, and that's just not it. Like, seeing like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's versions come back in, that fight with all three Peters, that was amazing, bro. And also the villains here were done well. Green Goblin is such a menace, he's such a great villain. Doc Ock, giving me a little bit of a story for Doc Ock was great. And the other villains all had a redemption arc, but I think Doc Ock's redemption arc was probably the best one here. Do love myself some Doc Ock. But yeah, there's just so much good about this film. Although my only issue was like maybe it was a bit of a mess. Some like the utilization of this film wasn't great. But it could have been a bit messy. But it kind of had to be in order to kind of put all this stuff in here. If that makes sense. See, number 7 on the list, Captain America: Civil War. I want to say the conflict in this film was just spot on. That final battle at the end with Tony and Steve going against each other and Bucky, that was emotional to watch, right? That just gives me chills every single time. But that was amazing, bro. And I thought Zemo was a good villain. I think it was unique to have a villain who just tears the Avengers apart instead of just going like physically fighting them. So yeah, some really good stuff in this film. That airport battle, of course, was very fun to watch. See, and you look at Batman vs Superman. I'm not a fan of Batman vs Superman, by the way. I did not like that movie. It just felt odd the way they handled it all. But this one, superheroes against each other, this one works very well, and there were some great scenes in this. Number 6, Captain America: Winter Soldier. I think this was a bit better than Civil War, just overall. It was a unique way to go, right? Like the whole politician kind of thriller. This action movie was very intense. Like the first time watching it was like, whew, the chills, man. Like it's just an action packed, and plus has some very brutal scenes. Like the Winter Soldier was a good villain, right? And you see Captain America going up against Bucky. That scene was that was kind of sad. And it was unique. You have villains who are kind of like undercover, working beneath the radar, who secretly want to under the radar, who secretly want world domination. Yep, an interesting take like on a movie. It just worked well. Steve Rogers, of course they got that elevator scene fight, which was just great. This is one of the good early films, you know. I can honestly appreciate in quite a lot of ways, and I feel like I can just chill and watch. I mean, this might be even higher. Like on rewatch, it becomes less of a surprise, right? But during when you first watch this, all the chills come down and stuff. So yeah, I love of course, the dynamics between Steve and Bucky to carry this film. The top 5 best MCU films. At number 5, Guardians of the Galaxy. This was a classic, right? I enjoy a lot of his stuff. The Guardians of the Family just work really, really well, and it was unique, right? Because at first people had low expectations, but they really pulled it off, right? James Gunn pulled it off. With his bunch of ragtag, broken people brought together, really works. However, the only problem is the villain Ronan the Accuser, but it's not about Ronan, is it? It's about the Guardians as a whole. How well they work. And the humour, honestly, holds up well in this film. So there's a lot to respect about Guardians of the Galaxy. So yeah. Number 4 on the list, I do have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I think this is actually the best Guardians film. There was a lot of good to this film, of course. There was actually a lot of good stuff, I didn't even know where to begin. Rocket's backstory was emotional, one of the most darkest things in the MCU, if not the darkest backstory we've gotten to an MCU character thus far. And every single character in this film was just handled well. Of course, you got Star-Lord, Mantis, Nebula, Drax. They were all handled so well, honestly. And of course, the High Evolutionary as a villain was so despicable. Every single time he was on screen, you just want to punch him in his face. And the stuff he did to Rocket was just cold. The stuff he's doing to lots of different beings he creates is just cold. And it's just nice to have a villain who's just so despicable. You want to hate in a movie and he just fits this film so well. See, I actually do like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a lot. I think there's a lot of good stuff about this film. It is kind of a hard watch. The first time I was in cinemas, I actually kind of teared up in cinemas, right? Still, so that's just a lot of good stuff going on, right? And this was actually an emotional film. It felt more like an MCU film kind of would have felt, as other people probably told you. Because it didn't feel that, it didn't really rely on the multiverse, which I was happy to see that. Only problem, Adam Warlock. He was a bit weird. But besides that, this film worked a treat. Plus, there was actually no rewrites of this film. Pretty amazing, right? James Gunn actually planned this film out quite a while back. It is number 3 on the list. Number 3 goes to Iron Man. And this is a classic. This is the one that started it all. Back when the days were simple. God, this film hits. This film hits. It's of course Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man is perfect casting. Iron Man's this is an amazing origin story. This one was just amazing. He's just such an interesting character. He's a very flawed person, but he kind of makes up for it in a way with his charisma, and also when he comes out of the cave a different person. And I thought Obadiah Stane was a good villain to start off with, because he's not the most complicated villain and rather straightforward, which I thought was, and his dynamics between him and Tony I think worked well. This film is just a classic, It's just so cool seeing Iron Man in that Iron Man suit for the first time. Oh god, this film is a classic. Number 2, Avengers Endgame, and yeah, you already know why this is high. That final battle, that was amazing. Tony Stark's death was sad, and just the overall plot of this film was it was good. Even the time heist was a bit weird. Every single character, I thought all the characters in this film were handled well, except for Hulk. Smart Hulk. I do not agree with that idea at all. Not much else to say besides this, but with number 1 on the list, of course, been Infinity War, and this film works so well because it's the film where they all lose. It's a very dark tone. The end where Thanos, the villain Thanos, snaps, and besides that, Thanos, of course, is the great MCU villain. He's the pinnacle MCU villains. It's basically Thanos' movie, right? Thanos is literally the protagonist of this film, if you know what I mean. As well as the main antagonist. And he just has that screen presence, so you can't help but respect him for his determination. And that scene where he kills Gamora, that was some pretty dark Thanos scenes, right, for sure. He snaps, and then that was some brutal stuff. Peter going to Tony, oh god, that was sad. See, a lot of the good stuff with Avengers Infinity War, and of course seeing a bunch of characters meet up, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, the Guardians and Iron Man, Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, all meeting up. Oh, that was amazing to see. And also, of course, you had that Thor's entrance on Wakanda. That was sick, right? That was great. And you just started off in such a dark kind of way where you see Thanos on Thor's ship just massacring his people. That was all dark. And Loki's death. So yeah. And thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye.